Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. Recently, I published a series of videos about coming out and how to do that at certain stages of life. This video is one right smack in the middle of the first two, which is not a dependent, and you don't have to necessarily ask anyone's permission to be who you are, and also not someone who is in a relationship, settled in their lives, and trying to figure out what to uproot and what not to. Before we get into that, I would really love for you to make sure you have subscribed. Make sure you're leaving a comment or two about what you thought of the video and other questions you want me to answer, and also liking the videos is very helpful to me too. Thanks so much. So just a reminder, the definition itself, coming out, can be a bit much for people, because the idea that as anyone who identifies in the LGBTQIA+ community has to announce to the world who they are, when those who are cisgender, heterosexual don't have to, that itself is steeped in heteronormativity. Just the idea of coming out is a heteronormative idea. However, we live in a heteronormative world. Hopefully that changes. Until it does, here we are. So however you phrase it, you do become responsible for telling people who you are. In telling people who you are, the biggest priority needs to be for it to be on your terms. You to decide who you tell, when you tell them, what you tell them. All of those things need to be on your terms. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, they end up not having complete control over those situations. Either there's a situation where they, yes, choose to say the words, but the circumstances of a situation have set it up so that they don't have any other choice. They either lie or they tell the truth. That situation happens much more often than most cishet people are aware. And for those of us in the queer community, it's sometimes a foregone conclusion that you're going to be in a group with people and somebody is not going to realize that honoring your process is essential, and they're going to assume something is public knowledge and it's not. Or I've known people who are found out by dating apps, or just in general by assumptions that people make about their lives, and then go to them and assert those assumptions and ask if they're true. Which, by the way, if there are any cishet people watching this, please remember that it is not your business to ask. Actually, no. If there are humans watching this, please remember, it's not your business to ask. If you have to ask someone, and it's just because you're curious, or it's just because you want to see if your hunch is right, you are invading someone's privacy. There are very few circumstances in which asking someone to identify themselves is appropriate. Sometimes in the medical community, only sometimes, because you don't always need to know. Often with a partner, never with a stranger. That's just how it is. In the video about coming out in your teens, we talked a lot about what it's like to be a dependent. This also goes into people in their 20s. They're often still dependent in a lot of ways on their parents or their family in order to help support them through the beginning stages of a career and school. So the ways that you can come out and the freedoms that you can kind of have are limited to how your family feels about the LGBTQIA+ community. When you are independent from other people, in other words, no one else is actually financially responsible for you and your well-being, there are actually some benefits to being in that stage before you start declaring who you are. And one of them, honestly, is financial independence. The idea that you're telling someone the truth about you does not potentially remove the safety of your finances is a big deal. In those situations, it is a lot harder for someone to force you into coming out because you don't have to be obligated to them for your actual survival in the world. That's a big benefit to being in your early adulthood or later when you are telling people who you are. Another one is living separately from family or friends from your childhood. Part of that is distance and space. It gives you the ability to privately live into who you know yourself to be and where you want to go with that without being, seen out at a bar or even seen in a grocery store with a partner. Right? If you have the physical distance, then even when things are rough, if you are working on that relationship with that family or with those friends from your younger years, the physical distance to pull away and be able to still live your own life and not feel like you have to hide places is a really big deal. That can be very healing. That can be very validating, and really does make the process easier. In the same vein of family, often people will choose to seek out a family that they build themselves. That might not look like a marriage and children, it might look in so many different ways, but they are people in your lives who you've chosen to bring into sort of your family circle because they are safe, because they are affirming, because they love you no matter what, because they'll call you on your crap, and because they want what's best for you and you want what's best for them. Those people, choosing those people in your life, especially if you don't have that in your family of origin, is a really big deal. Very productive in this entire idea of living into who you are, especially if you were not able to do that in your younger years. Especially in a COVID world, this next one is really interesting. The ability to look for communities, especially online, without having to ask anyone else's permission. If you have a spouse or if you have parents that are connected to your electronic accounts and stuff, finding those online spaces where you can be you, finding discussion boards, finding Discord servers, finding other places that you can just be you and ask your questions without, I don't know, maybe feeling silly or feeling like you should know the answer by now. You ever felt that way? It kind of happens when you come out later in life. Not having your internet history and all of the things that you're searching and the questions you're asking available to anyone else, and also not having to ask anyone's permission to do any of those things is a big deal. And that's another big benefit to coming out when you're not a dependent anymore. For people who are trans and non-binary, seeking out the ability to change legal documents does not require a caregiver's consent the way it does when you're a minor. So all of those types of legal changes are on you. You can do them in your timing, in your process, and in the places that you want to do that. All of those legal things are your decision, not anyone else's. Overall, there's a decrease in stress because of having to hide yourself from the people you are often around. When you're coming out and you're not in either of those two categories that we've done the videos on already, this is that sweet spot of, in a lot of ways, having much less stress about having to hide yourself because the people you surround yourself with are your choice. There's also some obstacles to coming out later in life. Again, in quotes, because the later in life idea is overplayed, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The assumption here is if you're coming out in your mid-20s or later, you do have something established. You have a job probably. You have an apartment or a home, or you're trying to get one of those. Most of our viewers are in the US, and it's very important that you understand that there are a lot of places where it is currently legal for people to dismiss someone from a job for no reason at all. Just they go. If you can prove it's discrimination, it's one thing, but in a lot of places you also don't have to prove it's discrimination. So, couple of things. Make sure you're up on the federal laws of what's legal and what's not legal for an employer or a landlord to do. Also make sure you're up on your state laws because depending on the state you live in, some of our states make up their own laws, whether they jive with the federal government or not. So while you don't necessarily have to worry about people that you're accountable to as far as family members, there are certain things that can get us in trouble in other areas like job security, right? So there still is a need to be careful about what you're posting online and cautious about the way that you are portraying yourself around other people because the stigma is still there, because the laws aren't where they need to be yet. These are just realities where we have to make some choices. It is okay to decide that you don't want to worry about that and to not worry about that. The big thing here is it needs to be your choice. Be comfortable with the choices you make. And even if you're not living near your family members, even if you're not living under their roof, the reality is there are still possibilities of losing friends and family members that you've had for a long time and dealing with that. You can go and seek your own therapeutic relationships, which I encourage you to do, but the loss is still there and the pain is still there, and ignoring that doesn't mean it's not there. Another issue is it's harder to meet people in your late 20s and beyond. It becomes exhausting at some point to think about starting over and over and over again on dates. For some people, it's super exciting, which is great. Maybe in the comments, you can go ahead and share how you keep the excitement up for starting new dates, because what I hear from a lot of people is, I just want to be done with this part and start living into a relationship already. And that can be really hard. Finding that can be really hard. So let's take a pin out of that later in life thing, shall we? The term later in life is generally used to talk about people who come out in their late 20s or later. I want you to understand some numbers here. In 2021, a Gallup poll estimated 5.6% of adults over 30 are in the LGBTQIA plus community. That is over 2% more than it was in 2012, which was 9 years ago. It's 9 years, right? Can somebody check my math? I'm pretty sure that's 9 years. 9 years later, is it? 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 9 years. 9 years after the first survey. In just 9 years, we've raised 2% of the population. Now, if you understand how large the United States is, that's a lot of people. There are so many things that influence when you are even able to have the freedom to explore these ideas of who you could possibly be, whether it's career-wise or whether it's how you identify or your orientation. All of those things have clocks on when you can actually even start exploring them. I mean, really exploring them and understanding that about yourself. The problem is where you grow up, the geography of where you grow up, the political climate you grow up in, the socioeconomic background of where you grow up, where you live as you become a young adult and adult. All of those things are going to contribute to whether or not you know this about yourself earlier in life. A very real fear of people who are in their mid to later 20s and beyond, when they understand these things about themselves, is that they've missed out. That if they had started earlier, they'd have better tools when dating people, or they might have already established a relationship and been in it already and wouldn't have to do the dating thing. Or maybe they feel like they've missed out on the dating fun because there's years that they could have been doing this for and weren't because they didn't know themselves well enough. All of those things are very common fears for people who don't come out till their mid to late 20s and beyond. I want you to hear this. Your process is your process. Where you came from, where you've been, where you're going is all part of you. It makes you you. And you might not think that you're the best version of you right now. Maybe we stop striving for the best version of ourselves and start striving for our favorite version of ourselves right now. What is your favorite version of you right now, and how do you continue to live into that? Your favorite version of you will change over the years because you'll have different experiences and your expectations will change. Your favorite version of you right now might not be your best. Best is so arbitrary. Best version is judged from the outside. Favorite version is judged from the inside. You are validating you. That's it. So if you are in your mid to late 20s and beyond and just starting on this scene or have been doing it for a while, do you. Don't judge other people who came out earlier or who come out later than you. Make the playing field even. You are in this incredible time of your life where you do get to decide who you are and you get to change it. Don't get stuck on things like labels. Don't get stuck on things like spaces that you're allowed to be you in or not allowed to be you in. Be you. Take up your space. Live your life at your pace. Whatever you're doing, be honest to you, be true to who you are, be gentle in discovering who that is, and love the experience. That's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you tune in next week, and I will talk to you all soon. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other.